During a brutal Detroit winter, a struggling single mother worked back-to-back diner shifts just to keep her son warm and fed. One night, as she walked home in the freezing dark, she found an old man huddled behind a dumpster, shivering, soaked, and forgotten. Taking him in meant risking her safety, her rent, and her last bowl of soup. But she did it anyway. She gave him shelter, fed him, and never once asked who he was. Days later, he vanished, until a black car pulled up with a letter that changed everything forever. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? In the crumbling edge of Detroit, where sirens were lullabies and cracked sidewalks told stories of dreams long broken, Amara Lewis lived in a one-bedroom apartment with her 8-year-old son Zion. Her world balanced on the edge of overdue rent notices and minimum wage diner shifts, where each day began with a prayer and ended with a whispered promise to her boy that tomorrow would be better, even if she wasn't sure how. On one freezing Tuesday night, the kind that iced your bones and silenced even the rats, she spotted an old man curled against a rusting dumpster behind her building, half-frozen, beard tangled, clothes soaked, shoes barely holding together, and though every instinct screamed she had nothing to give, not even enough heat for herself, she called down from her window, "You okay, sir?" And when he didn't move, she grabbed Zion's extra blanket and a bowl of lentil stew and brought them down. Kneeling beside the stranger like he was family, he blinked at her, stunned, as if confused by the warmth, and said, "Didn't think angels came round here." But Amara only smiled, said, "We don't. I'm just a waitress with bad timing and a soft spot for trouble," and helped him up, arm over her shoulder, back screaming from the weight, guiding him upstairs past neighbors who stared but didn't help, whispering about crazy single moms bringing in drunks. But she ignored them, set him on the couch, offered the stew, and made a bed on the floor for herself. The next morning, when she opened her eyes to the sound of clinking dishes, the man had made Zion pancakes out of her emergency mix, humming some old blues song like he'd lived there all his life. And Zion, who hadn't smiled since his father left them with nothing but debt and a note, laughed for the first time in months. The man said his name was Walter, just Walter, no last name, and that he'd gotten a bit lost, and Amara didn't press, though something about his accent, the way he folded napkins perfectly, and the way he stared out the window like he missed something no one else could see, told her he was more than he let on. Days turned to weeks, and Walter never left, fixing her stove, helping Zion with math, even repairing the broken radiator, using old parts he said just needed understanding. And though her neighbors warned her he's a vagrant, you'll regret this, she felt safer with him than she ever had with anyone else. Even when the landlord banged on her door demanding payment and threatening eviction, Walter simply said, "Don't worry, child," and handed her an envelope thick with cash, claiming he'd sold an old watch. But when she looked inside, it wasn't bills, it was a check for $15,000 made out from a private foundation she'd never heard of. She tried to return it, shaking with panic, but he stopped her, eyes soft but firm, and said, "You saved me, Amara. Let me return the favor. I know what it's like to be invisible," and walked away into the cold before she could argue. The next morning, he was gonna no sign, just his worn boots by the door and a broken chain necklace on the counter that had a key marked WH Industries Vault 3. And when she asked around, nobody had seen him leave. But a week later, a black car pulled up outside the diner while she was on shift, and a woman in a gray suit stepped out, asking, "Are you Ms. Amara Lewis?" And before she could answer, the woman handed her a letter sealed with gold wax and said, "Mr. Walter Harrington asked me to deliver this personally," then vanished before she could ask questions. Inside the envelope was a handwritten note, "For your kindness, for seeing me when no one else did. You'll find the deed to your building enclosed. Zion deserves a home that won't be taken from him again. WH," and beneath it, a notarized deed, mortgage fully paid, with her name on the title, and a savings account statement under her name, with a balance so absurd she laughed, cried, then sat on the floor until her manager found her shaking, holding the papers like they'd burn her fingers. Turns out Walter Harrington wasn't just some lost old man. He was the reclusive billionaire who disappeared 4 months ago after selling his empire and donating most of his wealth to anonymous causes. Only no one knew where he'd gone or why, and now, quietly, he'd made her and Zion his final cause. News vans came, reporters begged for interviews, but Amara refused, saying, "He didn't want praise, and neither do I," and kept working at the diner 3 days a week, not because she had to, but because Walter had shown her the power of dignity in the everyday. And on Zion's next birthday, instead of toys, he asked for two things: a plate of pancakes and a sign to hang on their building that read Walter's house. And she made both happen, crying as she nailed the plaque to the brick wall, whispering, "You gave us a future, old man." Years passed. Zion grew up, studied law with a scholarship from the Harrington Foundation, which no one connected to the missing billionaire until decades later, when a journalist followed the trail and found Amara sitting in the same apartment, now renovated and filled with art and warmth, who simply said he needed someone to believe in him again. So did I. We saved each other. And when the article went viral, strangers from around the world began sharing stories of Walter, a janitor in Ohio who found $50,000 in his mailbox, a woman in Nevada whose dying husband's hospital bill was mysteriously paid, a music school in Chicago rebuilt after a donation labeled from WH, and everywhere, the same thread: Walter had vanished into the country not to escape wealth but to see who would still care when he had nothing, and only Amara had passed his silent test without asking for a thing. When Amara finally passed away at 87, peacefully in her sleep, Zion placed her ashes beside a small river near a cabin Walter had once drawn in a napkin sketch, and on the stone he had carved, "Here lies a woman who opened her door and found a world behind it." And across the country, at another grave marked only with initials, someone left a single pancake on a porcelain plate, still warm,